Welcome into Vertical Pursuit, the podcast, webcast, where we try to equip men to live the life they were designed to live. And these days, it's even that statement can be scary and taken wrong. But I think once you understand and you get into the process and you start to learn where our hearts are and where I think most men's hearts are, it's how to settle the confusion about this world now. And how to move forward in a way that is loving and involves ways of, brotherhood, fellowship, and equipping each other for battle. And I know we like to use terms like battle, but that's kind of our heart for this podcast and webcast, and for your book, which is Vertical Pursuit, and the website, verticalpursuit.org. So we're happy that you have joined us. And do you find, and not to jump right in, but I was thinking this yesterday when I was talking to somebody who, and I'm a part owner in a golf simulator,
which is pretty awesome.
Sports bar.
It's pretty
place.
sweet. It's
cool.
pretty sweet.
What it gives me, and it's not as big as a forum or that as I used to have, platform, but I do get the chance to. Once in a while, I'll feel the need to reach out and talk to somebody. And I've had several of these. We've only been open since November, which a few months. But I've had the opportunity a couple of times where all of a sudden you feel either an invitation by the person or by something else to engage in a conversation. And so I did yesterday, and he hadn't heard of Vertical Pursuit, and I sent him what's your phone number? I sent him an episode, and turns out he is a prison guard. And as soon as I mentioned, and oftentimes there's ways you don't know where anybody's at in their walk, and we'll talk about that later on. As you always say, we never want to beat anybody over the head with a specific belief off the jump to make them run and categorize us. The best way you always say it is, how can I pray for you, usually? And no matter where the person is in their walk with whatever, if they believe at all, that rarely angers somebody. Right. And so I mentioned yesterday, I was talking about somebody else to this guy, and I just threw out, I said, he loves the Lord, and he's got a great relationship with the Lord. And the guy immediately then just said, oh my gosh, tell me more. And then texted me again after he had watched an episode. But I guess my point in all of that is, it always seems like, and there's guys, and maybe this is just me, I got to a certain age where things started to make different sense than they did to me when I was in my 20s.
That's true. Yeah.
And everybody has different seasons of life and different experiences that shape and form who they are. But do you find that men, as they get into their maybe 40s, 50s, end up with a different perspective? But even in this day and age, when we talk about the confusion around everything right now, from a man's standpoint, that they enter into new chapters and new areas of their lives where this is particularly not only challenging, but also maybe a greater desire to solve what it is that's bothering them.
Yeah. It's funny you use that word solve, because I think part of us as men, this is what gets us in trouble with our wives sometimes. We want to solve things, which that's part of why God created us. He did create us as problem solvers, and just got to know how to do that. But when we look at the things that are happening in our lives all around us, we get this hindsight. They always say that. The vantage point in life, looking back, kind of reveals things. It's where people live in regret. That's looking back on, I wish I would have, should have, I didn't, all those sort of things. And so I think as we mature, our vantage point changes, good and bad. Sometimes we live with that, like, gosh, what have I done with my life? I should have done more. And that's a whole nother thing. And also we try to make sense of things that we didn't have any bearing on whatsoever. I love that you had that encounter. Here you are, you're in a golf facility, which, by the way, is awesome. X-Golf is just awesome. I mean, we take our family there, give them as many mulligans as they want. It's
I'll fix that. I'll program that where that's not possible.
It's so cool. But one of the things I appreciate about you, Mike, before we jump into that too, is when you were working with the Blazers, and whether it was a GM, a player, you always had your radar out. And I think I don't want to fly past that too fast because you kind of set that up and we moved on. But I've known you as a good friend all these years, and you always have that radar up. It's why even at church on Sunday, there's a whole section of the Mike Barrett fan club. And I say that jokingly because they're all people that are sitting next to you because you took an interest in their life and you said, hey, come to church with me. And I think we're all aching for someone to just stop in the hectic busyness that actually will ask the question, hey, how are you doing? A guy walks into X Golf and you're like, hey man, how are you? Or you're asking a question like, hey, can I pray for you? And people just open up. And that's because it starts with someone who takes time to care and ask the question. I think that's important that we recognize that. Because men need that space where other men are going to say, how are you? What's really going on? Or are we just an island in and of ourselves, trying to process all these issues, trying to make sense of it? That's not going to go good for us if we're on an island.
And I don't often have that courage. I mean, it sounds like I do, but I don't. And it's funny because you say, how can I pray for you? Or you start to kind of show them where you stand. And I remember an excerpt out of our friend Donald Miller's book. Mm-hmm. I think it was Blue Like Jazz, one of his books. He's so good. And in Portland, there's Reed College, which is where very smart people are, but it's also one of the most radically liberal schools and godless schools, and they're proud of that.
Right.
And so one of the great parts of Don's book is when he and another friend went and set up a prayer booth
That's right.
at the school.
It's crazy.
And just
gutsy.
with courage saying, and he said the first thing that people would walk up and say, there is no God, but does God love me?
Yeah, right.
In the same sentence. And he kept hearing that over and over again. So oftentimes I remember that, and I should reach out to Don and tell him how much that has inspired me in terms of just having the courage to be brave and to be confident with where you're at, and before you wade into a discussion with somebody else. And I appreciate what you're saying about being mindful and being meaningful and being intentional about always asking. I'm not as good as I obviously always should be. But I think and you and I both have this, you as a pastor and me with what I used to do and somewhat still do, the gift of communication and an ease of communicating with people. Yeah. I think that's a gift, and I just want to be able to use it.
Right, absolutely. Well, and that communication it's creating the conduit for God to speak in through you. And you just open the dialogue. And I think it comes back to what you asked earlier is life hits us with all these blindsided moments. Everybody that's listening right now, I know everybody that's listening right now is like, if we said, hey, take 2 seconds right now, when did you wake up one day and got the news of something and it just dropped you out of nowhere, blindsided you? We can all fill in the blank with what that is. And then you try to make sense of that stuff. And sometimes you can. Sometimes you can add it up and go, A plus B equals C. I know why that happened. It made sense. Whether I did it, whether I was a part of it, or it happened to me, somebody else's fault. Then you have the things that you go, there is no A plus B equals C. There's just, why did this happen? I don't know what to do with it. Mm-hmm. And you've talked about that a lot.
Oh, man. Yeah. I mean, and it's funny, I mentioned getting to a certain age and having your perspective change, sometimes because you want it changed. Sometimes it has changed for you. And I've had that explained to me. I mean, to give you a little background, I was an NBA broadcaster for a long time. And then after the 2016 season, we were all fired. Yeah. And totally out of the blue, which I think that kind of thing usually is out of the blue. Although with me, I was very, my goal was never to be caught off guard.
Right.
I'm going to plan for every contingency. I got covered, man.
Yep.
I didn't know this one. So I think my point in that is I ride along, things go great, maybe too easy for me. And as I look back on it, and certainly you're appreciating it during the time, but you go through a time when it's just kind of one thing after another and life is easy. Fired, as you mentioned, something that drops you and you're like, well, okay, what now? And that's a whole nother episode, which nobody wants to hear. But I mean, the whole what now and how you reinvent yourself. But that happens, and I'm sent into a world of, okay, what's next? And knowing, however, that I had missed a lot, lived out of a hotel room, traveled the NBA life, did that for a long time. And so likely, not likely, it was a blessing in a weird way. But then my wife gets breast cancer, which thankfully has turned out okay. A battle and humbling as that always happens. But then I look at what the relationships that we created out of that, the perspective that was gained through that. And I'd never had a brush with cancer, never heard of it. I mean, I heard of it, but I never really had a
front row seat to it like that.
Absolutely. So then time goes on. She, you always, it's the new normal. You never completely get over that. It puts you in touch with others who are battling these things. And then cancer strikes again to my dad, who had never, healthiest guy, basketball coach, and this was quick.
Yeah.
This was detection. It was, okay, cyst on the brain. Let's go in and get that. And then it was, oh no, that's not a cyst. That's glioblastoma. That's, which is tough. And 3 weeks later and 2 surgeries later, he's gone.
Yeah.
That was in an instant. I mean, bam. And then even to recently,
I know.
just 2 weeks ago, my father-in-law, he had a stroke in November. And then all of a sudden, talks to me on the phone 2 weeks ago and sounds really good. An avid golfer in Arizona. And then we hear he took a turn for the worse. Next thing he's in hospice. Next thing he is gone.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the perspective, the way I kind of teed this up is, what do you do with all that?
Yeah.
I mean, if I want to try
that's
to
a good
connect,
question.
yeah, I know. And it's a basic one I get. And if I want to go back and try to connect the dots and say, okay, and you look for, so I had a friend of mine who's a friend of ours who's in the Traeger grill world, and I do some commercials for Traeger, and I love Greg. He came over the day I was fired, and this is when I thought that was bad news, a little
Right.
talk about perspective. And he said, and he gave me this accessory, this random accessory. It was like a tray or something. And he was just coming over to be present, which I really appreciate. And he wrote scripture all over the box, which I still have. And he basically just said, this is great news. I said, okay.
Yeah.
You want to expand on that a little? And he said, when something comes so much out of the blue and doesn't make any sense, he said, that's God. And I suppose I took that in at the moment, but at the same time, I'm going, okay, not sure as the provider of my family. And then now this is so public.
Yeah.
I don't know what this looks like. Do I have to move? I don't, But I guess that's a certain perspective about it is part of the plan. And then I think, okay, if I hadn't been zipped out of that world, I would not have been able to maybe be there to the point that I was for my wife when she went through her battle, for my dad who had his brain cancer and then subsequent death. And then now my father-in-law, two of the most important men obviously in my life. But I go back to the question now of, even though I have great faith, there's times when, and you've done a lot of funerals because you're a pastor. And there's a story you told me recently when a young person was claimed in a car accident, a horrible story, where you go into the hospital and the mother is just wailing and wailing at the loss of her child.
Yeah.
What do you tell people at that moment when they look at you and say, why? Why did this happen?
Yeah. It's interesting as a pastor, you're right. Cause your job is to show up in the worst moments of people's lives, and the camera and the lights and the microphone are on you. What do you say? And sometimes if we're an egocentric pastor, and there are those, I hope I'm not one of those. I pray I won't be one of those. But I think we can put pressure on ourselves. Like we're the one to make this better. It's not our job. Job is not to make this better. Our job is just to be present. And I think that's step one, is just being present. You know the story of Job, right? Job's life is in ruins, and he loses his family, his kids, his job, his business, his health. I mean, the guy's, everything's destroyed. And you see kind of what happens is his wife shows up, and bless her heart, but she doesn't give him the best advice. She's like, hey, curse God and die. Take the exit route, right? It's like, that's not the best advice. Like, could you be a little more nurturing than that, right? Pat me on the back a little. And then his friends show up. And it says that his friends show up and they said nothing. That was actually when his friends were at their best. When they opened their mouths, they started saying, well, maybe this happened because you have sin in your life.
Right.
And like it's his fault, right?
Right.
It's like, oh, now they're actually saying the worst thing you could ever say. So I think
It's like, even though you're thinking that, don't say it out loud.
Exactly. That's not what you say. And I think that when we're in presence with people's lives at the worst, that God's saying, I'm making my presence known to them through you. And you just ask the Lord, what do you want me to say in this moment? And everybody wants answers. Why did this happen? And we don't always have the answers. And I think it would be arrogant for me to try to put an answer in that God's not intending for there to be an answer. I mean, I have understanding. There's things I can explain. Me losing my dad at 22 and
In a car accident.
He's on his way to go speak at a camp for teens to encourage them. And you're like, this isn't right. This is unfair. Why would God let? I mean, I always remember looking back going, there's so many dirt bags out there that are harming the world. We'd all be okay if they got in car accidents and died. But why a teenage son? Why my dad? Why did these two amazing men in your life who get cancer and pass away? I mean, why? These things don't make sense. And it's interesting because at the end of Job's story, there's this moment where God says, Job has this honest, like he just gives it to God. He's frustrated, he's angry, and God gives him permission to do that. And God kind of says, hey, who are you and who am I? And Job makes this confession. He said, before all this happened, I knew based on rumors from other people's stories that you were a faithful God. Then he says, but I know now firsthand that you are a faithful God. Sometimes we don't know and we can't put into words God's faithfulness until we experience it. Sometimes the only way to experience God's faithfulness is a time when it seems like he's not faithful, when things bad happen. And, what do we do with those things? And I mean, I can sit here and tell you, like, listen, there's sin in the world, and sometimes people make bad decisions. Those sin equals consequences. Somebody goes in and shoots up somebody. That's that person's fault. God gives free choice, and there's consequences with free choice. Like, that makes sense, right? But that's not always comforting because people want to know. And I think the other thing, too, is you'll have a lot of pastors will come in and say, all things work for the good. I hate that answer out of the gate because unless you explain that, my definition of good is that my dad didn't die. My definition of good is that your father-in-law and your dad didn't die. So coming and telling me this is good, I'm like, no, this doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. And it kind of comes back to this mystery that God is working, God is allowing free will, but he's working things. The Bible says he is working things for the good of those that love him. And sometimes he pulls the curtain back and we see it immediately. I know now, my dad passed away when I was 22. I'm 48. I can tell you in hindsight, I do see a lot of good that came from that I didn't see at 22. Does that make that good that he died? No, but can I see some good that came from it? It was huge in my life.
How long did it take you to where you weren't angry with God about that? Or angry in general about that?
Well, it took me, because I always thought I got to pretend that God is good. And it was the first time I told this story before. I was angry, bitter at God, cursing God, swearing. And a friend of mine said, you can tell God how you really feel even about him. God's a big boy. He can handle that. I never had anybody tell me that. This is me relating to that Job piece. So now I'm going, me firsthand, it changed the way. So now when I have a bad day, I come really vulnerable with God. I'm open. I don't have to come with God and go like, God, you're good. And I'm going to kind of fake it till I make it. He's like, don't give me that. Come on, Mike, be real with me. And I think the other thing too, is the Bible says the comfort we receive is the comfort we pass on to others. And in a weird sort of way, because I lost my dad and it was my loss, but my loss became a gain to others, because I've been able to come alongside a lot of people and comfort them and encourage them. And so in a weird sort of way, losing my dad equipped me to be more understanding, more sympathetic, that I can help others. So I've learned over these years to find some purpose in that pain. That takes time and that's hard. It's not always easy.
Well, and so I was asked, I had a friend, a good friend of mine from college, and his daughter was, and not to stay on this theme, but she was hit head on by a drunk driver and killed on her first day of college. I hit my knees when he called. Yeah, brutal. God, I think back at that. It was only a few years ago. And then they say, will you do the eulogy? And it's going to be a packed house. And I said, I can talk in front of crowds. That's what I've done, but I don't know. And you and I had breakfast. This is probably, I don't know how long, maybe 4 years ago. And so what you gave me was the story of Lazarus. And so I thought of it a second ago because you talked about Job being allowed to question and be angry. And that story, I can't make sense of it, all of it, but I told that at that service. I hope that meant something. I think I did it okay, but it was more. Number one, it was a huge example of Jesus being fully God and fully man, and weeping. Of course, that was where the shortest verse in the Bible.
In the Bible
is
Jesus wept.
Jesus wept. Cried with them, allowed them, Mary and Martha, to be angry at him for not being there, as they both ran out and said, "Where have you been? This wouldn't have happened had you been here." And I think that's powerful. And then he weeps with them, and then later raises Lazarus. And the raising of Lazarus isn't. I mean, it is obviously hugely powerful in the story, but for me, the most powerful is the freedom and the license we are given to be angry and to show that we don't understand, and the fact that he can take that.
Yeah. And Hebrews tells us that we have this high priest. And speaking of Jesus, that when we go to pray, he's one who actually sympathizes and identifies with our weakness and pain. Sometimes we go to God and we're like, he's out of touch. He has no clue. Actually, it's the opposite of that. He knows way more than we do what it's like to be rejected. He knows way more what it's like to feel the anguish of loss and pain and suffering more than we could ever comprehend. And he invites us to come to him and say, just bring it. And he promises there's an exchange. That when we bring it before him, he says, then I'll give you what you need in this moment. And so I think when we all go, because you guys are listening right now and they're going, okay, I just found out my wife cheated on me. That's my blind side, right? I just found out terminal cancer for me or someone I love greatly. Boom, blind side, right? Or lost my job. We all got something. And I think the temptation is to do one of two things. One is to get bitter. And we just kind of clench our fist. We're angry. And there's a part of that where that's good. I tell people this when they're grieving and they're angry. You can camp there, just don't build a house there. Because if you camp there, that's okay.
I stole that line, by the way, in that service.
And if we do, because it's like we build a house on foundation of resentment and bitterness, then the whole house is framed around that. And that's not a pleasant house to live in. But when you camp there, it's like, hey, I'm here and God meets me in this space. And so when you think of like that story of Lazarus, I love it because Jesus, he could have responded and prevented it. They sent word and say, hey, Jesus, you've been doing all these miracles. Come show up. And why don't you do the miracle over there? See, I did that with my dad. When my dad died, I'm like, God, I hear all these stories of people, they prayed and people come to church and I just want to praise God. He prevented this accident from happening. I'm like, screw you.
Yeah.
Because he didn't do that with my dad. And that's, as a 22-year-old man, that was my rage inside of me.
Understandably.
Like, don't give me your praise, because that just adds insult to what I'm struggling with God. And I didn't know what to do with that, right? And so all that to say is when Jesus shows up with the two sisters of Lazarus, they kind of give it to him. They're like, what? Why did you let this happen? You're the God of miracles and you didn't stop this? And they just give it to him.
Yeah.
And he just sits there and he's like, yeah.
And you're expecting him at that moment, the first few times you get familiar with the story, that he's going to just rebuke them for their lack of faith, which he does occasionally, but not with them, not in that moment, which I thought was powerful.
Yeah. And then I love the fact that Jesus actually, before Lazarus died, knew that he was going to raise him back. This is crazy. So why would Jesus weep then? Why is Jesus crying over the loss?
That's a big one too.
Yeah. It's like, why are you crying, Jesus? In about 10 minutes, you're going to raise him back. It shows that even Jesus doesn't just allow us to come to him vulnerably. He identifies that with it. He weeps with us. I think that's powerful. I just want, whoever's listening right now is, God sees you where you're at. He hasn't abandoned you. He's not punishing you. He's with you in it. And he invites you to be honest with him. He's weeping with you. And I think that is the answer. That's what we say. When we can't, why is this happening? I don't know. It's not for me to tell you, why did these things happen? But I can tell you, where is God at for you in the midst of this?
Have you had moments when somebody is dealing with indescribable loss and you sense that, I mean, at the moment they're going to say a lot of things, but you sense that they're not only angry, I mean, because some people, I envy the people who at those moments, and my wife's one of those people, you get news like that, pour right back into God and thank you and immediate praise. And then there's lots of people, and I'm not sure I'm the one that, to my shame, does that. I probably get a little bit mad. I don't know all the time. As I've matured, I don't think I probably do as much, but how do you prevent that? And then if they come back to you and they've completely moved away from it, and they ask you those questions. I mean, I know I asked you this before, but it's got to be difficult. Yeah. And as you said, I think a lot of pastors, a lot of people try to have answers, and sometimes the presence of, and I go back to my friend when he lost his daughter, and I drove down, I dropped everything and went down that morning.
That's what you did.
And to go down there on his porch where he and his wife are just heaving and sobbing, and you can't say anything.
No.
And so I just sat there. I mean, but I'm feeling like, because I'm kind of a communicator, I'm feeling like, what should I? But what do you say?
I know.
And there's literally nothing that you can say.
I went to one of the craziest stories was I got a phone call on a Saturday, and it was a young gal, and she said, "Hey, I'm in Virginia. My mom's here in town where I'm at here, Wilsonville, and mom has cancer, and they thought she was going to have longer. I'm stuck in back east, and we just found out from the doctor she's not going to make it past today." She goes, "Can you go up to the hospital and be with my mom? I can't be there. Can you be there in my place?" I said, "Absolutely." I drove right to the hospital. Well, her brother was so angry that they had to come out and warn me before I went into her room, "Don't go in there because her son is going to throw you through the wall because you represent God. He's so pissed and angry at God. If you walk in there," they said they physically were trying to protect me from him. I said, "That's fine. I'll sit out here in the waiting room. I'll just pray." And all of a sudden, maybe an hour later, I said, "Okay, he's okay if you come in," because the mom who was getting ready to pass, she wanted me to read the Psalms over her as she took her last breath. So this son, who's so violent, angry, wants to punch me through the wall, he sat on one side of her bed, and I sat on the other. And I pulled out Psalms, and I just started in Psalm 1, and I read for 2 hours until she took her last breath.
Wow.
About a week to, it's maybe longer than that, it's probably 3 weeks later, that same son says, "Can we go out to breakfast?" And we sat there, and he said, "I just need to talk about what's really going on." I think I didn't do anything. I was present. I read the Psalm, but I didn't answer anything. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't even try to restrain him. I just let him be, and God worked through that. And I think like that's the point of all this, is be present and let God work through you in the midst of that.
That's great. That's what makes you a great leader and a great pastor and a great NBA team chaplain is. I think you always have a good sense of what to say, and then more importantly, what not to say, and how to be there and be present and be intentional. We appreciate you tuning into Vertical Pursuit. We invite you to, check out the book that Mike wrote, Vertical Pursuit, and go on the website, verticalpursuit.org, and we will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in and watching. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast, comment, or message us, and check out our website at verticalpursuit.org. Download the VP app and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.